Imagine this. The most powerful drag racing organization in the world, the NHRA, got so embarrassed by one man that they secretly apologized to him, but never admitted it publicly. No press release, no article, no official record at all. Just a quiet phone call and the words they hated saying, "We were wrong." The man they had to swallow their pride for? Smokey Yunick. The outlaw genius, the wizard of the rulebook, who turned the NHRA's own regulations into his personal playground. They accused him of cheating, threatened to ban him, tore his cars apart looking for tricks, and when they finally realized he hadn't broken a single rule, they had no choice but to crawl back to him in the shadows and apologize. This is the hidden story the NHRA still doesn't want you to know, the secret apology given to the drag racer who beat them at their own game. If you love real, raw racing history, hit that like button right now and let's dive in. Who was Smokey Yunick? Smokey Yunick wasn't just a mechanic. He was a legend who redefined what it meant to win in American motorsports. Born Henry Yunick in 1923 to Ukrainian immigrant parents, he grew up on a hardscrabble farm in Pennsylvania. After losing his father young, he dropped out of school at 16 and started fixing anything with wheels or an engine, even building his own tractors from junkyard parts. That's where he got the nickname Smokey, from the thick clouds of exhaust his early motorcycles and hot rods threw into the air. World War II called next. Smokey became a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber pilot, flying combat missions over Europe and surviving some of the deadliest air battles of the war. When peace came, he flew over Daytona Beach on his way home, fell in love with the place from the cockpit, and decided that was where he would stay. In 1947, he opened what he proudly called the best damn garage in town, a no-nonsense shop in Daytona that quickly became ground zero for some of the fastest, smartest, and most controversial race cars ever built. Smokey dominated NASCAR like no one else in his era. He was twice named Mechanic of the Year, crew chief for champions like Herb Thomas, Marvin Panch, and the legendary Fireball Roberts. He built engines that shattered records, won Daytona 500s, and worked as the secret weapon for Chevy, Ford, Pontiac, you name it. But what a lot of people forget is that Smokey didn't stay in stock cars only. He jumped headfirst into the drag racing wars of the late 1950s and early 1960s, building and tuning superstock Pontiacs, early muscle cars, and factory hot rods that terrorized the quarter-mile. His name was feared in NHRA tech inspection lines just as much as it was in NASCAR garages. His philosophy was brutally simple and terrifyingly effective. You don't race cars, you race the rulebook. And nobody played that game better than Smokey. He found loopholes no one else saw, oversized fuel lines that secretly held extra gallons, bodywork tweaks that cheated the wind while staying technically legal, innovations so clever they forced every sanctioning body to rewrite their rulebooks overnight. They called him the wizard of the rulebook, the outlaw genius, the man who made officials wake up in a cold sweat. The NHRA thought they could control him. They were wrong. And one day they pushed too far, and had to pay for it in the quietest way possible. The controversy that started it all. By the early 1960s, American drag racing had turned into a full-blown factory war. Chevrolet, Ford, Pontiac, Dodge, Plymouth, every major carmaker wanted bragging rights on the quarter-mile. They poured money into superstock classes, building lightweight, high-horsepower machines that were supposed to be showroom stock but were anything but. And right in the middle of that storm stood Smokey Yunick, the man factories quietly called when they needed to win on Sunday and sell on Monday. Smokey wasn't just tuning engines, he was engineering around the rulebook like it was a puzzle to be solved. He prepared Pontiac Super Duty catalysts and Tempests for privateers and factory teams alike. These cars were monsters, 421 cubic inch V8s, aluminum front ends, acid-dipped bodies, 4-speed manuals, built to run low 12s or even high 11s at a time when most street cars struggled to break 15 seconds. But the faster Smokey's cars went, the louder the complaints became from other teams. "There's no way that thing is legal," they'd say after another hole shot and another trap speed win. The NHRA tech inspectors started paying extra attention whenever a Smokey-prepped car rolled into the lanes. One weekend, the exact event varies depending on who's telling the story, but it happened during a major NHRA national event in the 1962 to 1963 timeframe. Smokey's Pontiac went through tech inspection like it always did. The inspectors checked roll cage padding, safety equipment, weight, engine displacement, carburetor size, tire size, everything on the checklist. They measured, weighed, poked, and prodded. Nothing stood out. Smokey passed tech, rolled to the starting line, and promptly ran away from the field, cutting a killer light and posting a trap speed that made the announcer double-check his notes. That should have been the end of it. A clean win, another trophy, another story for the Pontiac Public Relations Department. Instead, it became the beginning of the trouble. Rival teams lodged formal protests. They claimed Smokey's car had to be cheating, the straight-line speed was too high, the ET too low for a supposedly stock-bodied car. The NHRA, under pressure to look impartial and keep the peace among the factory-backed teams, decided to dig deeper. After the event, they called Smokey aside and told him they were impounding the car for a more thorough teardown at the National Tech Facility. Smokey didn't argue. He just shrugged, handed over the keys, tipped his cowboy hat, and said, "Go ahead, boys. Measure anything you want." The car was trailered away. Over the next few days, NHRA officials disassembled it piece by piece. They checked frame rails for hidden compartments, measured wheelbase down to the fraction of an inch, weighed every removable part, inspected the intake manifold for secret passages, even X-rayed suspension components looking for trickery. They were hunting for the legendary Smokey tricks, the kind of clever engineering that had already forced NASCAR and USAC to close loopholes multiple times. They found nothing. No oversized fuel lines. No hidden nitrous bottles. No illegal displacement. No shaved body panels. The car was built exactly to the letter of the superstock rules as they were written at the time. The officials had to admit, privately at first, that Smokey had beaten them fair and square. But instead of quietly closing the protest and declaring the car legal, they doubled down. Word came back to Smokey that certain key people at NHRA headquarters were unhappy with the result. They didn't like that one man could consistently make their rulebook look foolish. So they decided to change the narrative. Even if this particular car was legal today, they said Smokey's style of preparation was dangerous to the sport. They began talking about issuing a new interpretation of the rules that would effectively outlaw several of the design philosophies Smokey had used across multiple cars. That was the moment they crossed a line. Smokey wasn't just another racer, he was a man who believed in winning within the rules, not breaking them. Being accused of cheating was one thing. He could laugh that off. But being told that his legal innovations were suddenly against the spirit of the rules felt like a personal attack. He made it clear, in his blunt Pennsylvania farm style, that if the NHRA tried to retroactively penalize him or ban his techniques without due process, he'd have no problem taking the fight public and letting every drag racer in America know exactly how the rulebook was being weaponized. Behind the scenes, the pressure built. Factory representatives who relied on Smokey's cars for wins quietly let the NHRA know they wouldn't be happy if their star tuner got pushed out. Other independent racers started asking questions about why one team was being singled out when everyone was pushing the envelope. And Smokey himself, never shy, dropped hints in conversations with journalists that he had documentation, measurements, and correspondence proving his cars had passed tech multiple times. The situation was threatening to turn into a public relations disaster for the NHRA. So, quietly, without any announcement, the leadership backed off. They dropped the proposed rule interpretation that would have targeted Smokey's methods. The protested car was released back to him with no penalty, no fine, no suspension. And this is the part that became whispered legend in the pits. A senior NHRA official placed a private call to Smokey at the best damn garage in town. The conversation was short. No apologies were recorded on paper. No witnesses were present. But those who knew both men later said the official admitted the association had overreached. They had misjudged the situation. They had let pressure from other teams cloud their judgment. And they were sorry for the trouble. Smokey never bragged about the call. He didn't need to. He just went back to building faster cars and finding new gray areas. But word spread anyway. Mechanics, crew chiefs, and fellow racers started telling the story in hushed tones. You know the NHRA had to say sorry to Smokey, but they'll never admit it. That quiet backdown became part of his legend. Proof that even the rule makers could be outsmarted by the wizard of the rulebook. The secret apology. It happened on one of those heavy, humid Florida evenings in late August 1963 when the air felt like wet cotton and even the cicadas sounded tired. Smokey Yunick was working alone in the best damn garage in town, the way he preferred it when the real thinking needed to get done. The big roll-up doors were propped wide open, letting in the night breeze that carried the faint salt smell from the Atlantic a few miles away. A single bare 100-watt bulb hung from a frayed cord above the main workbench, throwing stark shadows across the concrete floor that was stained black from decades of spilled oil, brake fluid, and dropped wrenches. Scattered around were the usual relics of a life spent chasing speed, stacks of dog-eared hot rod magazines from the late 50s, a half-empty coffee can full of rusty valve springs, a row of micrometers lined up like soldiers, And in the center of it all, the object of his current obsession, a freshly machined Pontiac 421 Super Duty block, its cylinders gleaming under the harsh light like polished gun barrels. The phone rang. Not the main shop line that rang during business hours with parts orders and crew complaints, but the private black rotary he kept hidden behind a stack of yellowed tech bulletins on a small metal desk in the back corner. That phone almost never rang after 9 p.m. unless it was urgent. A racer broken down on the side of US 1, a factory engineer with a midnight deadline, or one of his own guys calling collect from a gas station in Georgia. Smokey considered ignoring it. He was deep in thought about piston-to-all clearance and how much tighter he could run it without risking a cold scuff. But something, maybe the same gut instinct that had kept his B-17 Flying Fortress out of the flak over Schweinfurt, made him wipe his hands on the ever-present red shop rag, now more black than red, and cross the quiet shop to answer. He lifted the heavy receiver. The voice on the other end was low, careful, and immediately familiar. It belonged to one of the NHRA's most senior officials. A man whose signature appeared on the rule changes that made or broke seasons, a man who rarely spoke directly to competitors unless the conversation was going to be difficult. Tonight it was going to be very difficult. There was no, "Hello, Smokey," no, "How's Daytona treating you?" Just a long, uncomfortable breath, then the words came out like they'd been rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Smokey, we've gone back through the entire file. Every piece of paper, every measurement slip, every weight ticket from the tech center teardown. We had legal look at it again, and the competition committee reviewed it in closed session last week. The conclusion is unanimous and final. Your car was in complete compliance with the super stock regulations as they existed and were published at the time of the event. No violations. No hidden compartments. No illegal modifications. Nothing that could be construed as cheating under the rules in force that weekend." Smokey didn't respond. He just leaned against the workbench, rag still in hand, eyes fixed on the engine block as if it might offer commentary. He knew the hard part was coming. The official continued, voice dropping to something close to a whisper. The decision to pursue a retroactive interpretation, to draft language that would have effectively outlawed several of the preparation techniques you've used, not just on that one car, but across your program, that decision was made too quickly. We were under pressure. Heavy pressure. From multiple factory teams who were tired of losing to the same preparation. From sponsors who felt the playing field was tilting too far in one direction. From people inside and outside the association who thought the sport needed to be protected from, well, from guys like you. We let that pressure override our better judgment. We tried to change the rules after the checkered flag had already fallen. That was a mistake. A serious mistake. Another pause. This one lasted so long Smokey could hear the faint crackle of the long-distance line and the distant sound of a car passing on the street outside. "So I'm calling you tonight on this private line, with no recording, no secretary taking notes, no witnesses on either end. This conversation never happened in any official sense. But I'm telling you straight, we're sorry. We were wrong. We got it wrong, Smokey. And we know it." The words settled into the shop like the last echo of a burnout. Smokey let them hang there. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He'd waited weeks for this moment. A few more seconds wouldn't hurt. Finally he spoke, voice calm and even, the same tone he used when explaining jetting changes to a nervous driver. "I know." The official tried to regain some footing. "We're killing the proposed interpretation. It's dead. The car is legal. You're free to run it as prepared at any NHRA-sanctioned event. No fines. No points adjustment. No probation. No further action of any kind. We're putting this matter behind us." Smokey gave the smallest possible acknowledgement. "Good." Then, after a beat, "Anything else?" There wasn't. A quiet, "No," a brief hesitation, then the line clicked dead. Smokey set the receiver back in its cradle with a soft, final sound. He stood motionless for perhaps 10 seconds, staring at the phone as though it might ring again and take the words back. Then he walked back to the workbench, picked up the micrometer, checked the cylinder bore one more time, and resumed work exactly where he'd left off, humming a half-remembered B-17 squadron march under his breath. But secrets like that don't stay buried in the racing world, especially not when the man at the center is Smokey Yunick. The first whispers started the following weekend at a small regional meet in Central Florida. One of Smokey's trusted mechanics had been loading the trailer when he overheard two NHRA officials talking in hushed tones near the tech trailer. Words like, "the call," "sorry," and "Yunick" floated out, carried on the night breeze. By Monday morning, the story had reached the Daytona Beach Speedway infield. Crew chiefs repeated it over eggs and coffee at the diner across from the old beach course. Journalists who lived for pit gossip picked it up third-hand from sources they trusted. The details were consistent: late-night call on the private line, admission of overreach, the word sorry, spoken by a man who never apologized lightly. There was zero hard proof. No tape. No letter. No witness who'd listened in. Smokey himself never breathed a word of it to anyone. But the people who knew him, the ones who'd watched him stare down inspectors, outsmart engineers, and win races that shouldn't have been winnable, didn't need proof. The story fit him like a perfectly honed piston ring. Within weeks it had become underground lore. At the US Nationals in Indy, racers murmured it while waiting in the staging lanes. At the Winter Nationals the next February, Pontiac teams turned it into a running gag. Don't piss off Smokey, he'll make the NHRA call him and cry. Even some mid-level NHRA officials started hearing the rumor and quietly asking their bosses. The response was always the same: stone-faced silence, subject change, move on. The secret apology became part of Smokey's invisible armor. From that point forward, tech inspection with his cars was different. Still rigorous, no one got lax, but the tone shifted. Inspectors measured 3 times instead of twice. They asked questions instead of issuing accusations. They treated him with the wary respect one reserves for someone who has already proven they can make the system bend. Decades later, when Smokey was long gone and drag racing had entered the age of electronic fuel injection, telemetry, and carbon fiber everything, the story still lived. At nostalgia drags, old-timers gathered around coolers and told it again. Gray-haired crew chiefs would lean in close and say, "You know the NHRA had to call Smokey Yunick late one night and say they were sorry, but they'll never admit it on paper, not in a million years." Younger racers, raised on pro-stock 10-second cars and 300 miles per hour top fuel runs, would listen with the same or reserved for tales of Big Daddy Don Garlits or Jungle Jim. And the answer to their questions was always the same: there ain't more to tell, kid. That's the beauty of it. It happened in the dark, between 2 men on a telephone, and the only people who needed to know already knew. That quiet, private apology was never about the NHRA being weak. It was about them being forced to acknowledge strength. Strength in the form of one man, a stubborn, brilliant, grease-stained genius who came from a Pennsylvania farm, flew bombers over Nazi Germany, and then came south to turn the rulebook into his personal chessboard. They didn't enjoy saying it. They resented having to say it. But they could no longer pretend it wasn't true. So they said, sorry, in the only place they could, the shadows. Where no reporters waited. Where no cameras rolled. Where the only witness was the man who had earned every single syllable of contrition. And Smokey Yunick? He accepted it the way he accepted every victory, every record, every impossible hole shot. With a quiet nod, a tip of the cowboy hat, and then straight back to the garage to dream up the next move that would make the rule writers curse his name all over again. Smokey Yunick walked away from active racing in the late 1980s, but he never really left the garage. Until the day he passed in 2001 at age 77, he kept tinkering, kept inventing, kept proving that the only real limit in motorsports was the imagination of the men holding the wrenches. His shop in Daytona, that sacred space called the best damn garage in town, became something close to a shrine for racers who understood the difference between cheating and genius. People still make pilgrimages there, standing in the empty bays where history was quietly rewritten one loophole at a time. What Smokey left behind wasn't just a list of wins or a collection of trophies. He left a changed sport. Every time you see a modern drag car with a mandated minimum weight, or a specific restrictor plate, or a rule about wheelbase tolerance down to the millimeter, thanks Smokey. He forced the rule makers to get smarter because he was too smart for the old rules. NHRA, NASCAR, USAC, they all had to thicken their books, close the gray areas, and sometimes even create entirely new classes just to keep up with what one man could dream up in a Florida garage. The rulebook didn't evolve because Smokey broke it, it evolved because he mastered it. His innovations still echo today. The idea of using the absolute letter of the law against itself, that Smokey's DNA in every crew chief who spends sleepless nights studying the latest tech bulletin. Modern pro stock teams, funny car teams, top fuel teams, they all live in the world Smokey helped create. They push boundaries that would have been unthinkable without him showing it was possible. Even the factory involvement in drag racing, the way manufacturers still chase quarter-mile bragging rights, owes a debt to the superstock wars where Smokey's Pontiacs made the competition look slow and ordinary. But the real measure of the man isn't in the hardware or the lap times. It's in the stories. The way old racers light up when they talk about him. The way they lower their voices and say, "You know the NHRA had to apologize to Smokey, but they'll never put it in print." That quiet phone call, that grudging "we were wrong," became the ultimate proof that brains beat bureaucracy. Smokey never needed the apology to feel vindicated. He already knew he was right. The call just confirmed what the stopwatch had been saying for years. Smokey Yunick was never inducted into every hall of fame he deserved. Some organizations hesitated, maybe because his methods made them uncomfortable, maybe because admitting his greatness meant admitting their own shortcomings. But the racers know. The people who turned wrenches beside him, who lost to him, who learned from him, they understand. They know he was more than a mechanic. He was a philosopher of speed. A pilot who bombed Nazis by day and bombed records by night. A farm boy who turned junk into victory and rules into playgrounds. So the next time you're at the strip and you see a car launch so hard it makes the grandstand shake, or a crew chief arguing with tech over a measurement that's legal by a hair, remember Smokey Yunick. Remember the man who made the rule makers blink first. Remember the drag racer, yes, drag racer, who forced the NHRA to say sorry without ever saying it out loud. That's his legacy. Not the apologies he received, but the respect he commanded. Not the rules he bent, but the ones he made necessary. Not the wins he took, but the way he changed the game forever. If you've made it this far, you're part of the tribe now. You get it. You understand why Smokey's name still gets whispered like a secret weapon. So do this for me. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Smokey Yunick could still win today? Could he find the loopholes in 2025's rulebook the way he did in the 60s? Hit that like button if you believe the wizard of the rulebook would still be untouchable. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. The real ones, the hidden ones, the ones the sanctioning bodies wish stayed buried. Until next time, keep your eye on the rulebook, because someone out there is reading it with Smokey's eyes. This is the story of the drag racer the NHRA quietly apologized to, but never admitted. Smokey Yunick. Forever the legend.